Let's see how you live without my money. My husband shouted across the courtroom, his voice echoing like a knife. Everyone turned to look at me, waiting for my reaction, but I didn't shout back. I didn't even flinch. Instead, I reached slowly into my bag, and what I pulled out silenced the entire room. I wasn't always the woman standing in that courtroom, holding my ground against a man I had once loved with everything in me. No. Once upon a time, I was the girl who believed in fairy tales, in happily ever after, in a perfect family life. His name was Ryan. Charming, successful, the kind of man who made everyone laugh at parties. When he noticed me at a friend's barbecue 10 years ago, I felt like I was the luckiest woman alive. He pursued me with flowers, dinners, and sweet promises. My parents adored him. My friends whispered that I'd hit the jackpot, and in those early days, I believed it. We got married in a small church ceremony, my white dress flowing. His eyes locked on me, as if I was the only person in the world. I thought it was the beginning of forever, but forever, it turned out to be shorter than I imagined. The cracks began to show after a year. Ryan became controlling. At first, it was small things: what I wore, how I styled my hair, who I spent time with. Then, it was the money. "You don't need to work," he'd say, snatching the job application from my hands. "I make enough for both of us. Just focus on being a good wife." I told myself it was love, that he just wanted to take care of me. But soon, the bank accounts were all in his name. The credit cards his. I was given an allowance, like a child, and reminded every single day that without him, I'd be nothing. "Don't forget who pays the bills, sweetheart," he'd say, smirking as he dropped a wad of cash on the counter. The love I once felt was replaced by dread. I lived in a beautiful house that felt more like a prison. Decorated with expensive furniture, I wasn't allowed to move, surrounded by walls that felt like they were closing in. Then came the betrayal. It was a rainy Tuesday when I found the first message. His phone buzzed on the counter, and for once, he wasn't quick enough to snatch it away. A woman's name? A message too intimate to ignore. I confronted him, and instead of guilt, he laughed. "What do you expect, huh? You don't work. You don't contribute. You're just here. Be grateful I keep you." My heart shattered, but something else lit inside me that night. A spark. A quiet, burning determination. I had given him my trust, my love, my loyalty, and he had given me nothing but control, betrayal, and lies. So, I began to plan. What Ryan never realized was that every time he tried to keep me in my place, I was learning, watching, saving. He thought I had no access to money. But he didn't know about the small savings account I had opened years earlier with cash from tutoring kids at the library. Before we married, he didn't know that I kept receipts, documents, even copies of his business records that mysteriously ended up in the shredder, and most importantly, he didn't know that the woman he thought was powerless had more strength than he could imagine. By the time I filed for divorce, Ryan was furious. He stormed through the house like a man possessed, shouting threats, slamming doors. He told me I'd regret leaving him, that I'd starve without him, that no one would believe me. And when we finally faced each other in that courtroom, he made his biggest mistake yet. He looked dead in the eye and shouted for the world to hear. "Let's see how you live without my money." Gasps filled the room. My lawyer shifted uncomfortably. Ryan stood tall, smirking, thinking he had destroyed me. But he didn't know what I had in my bag. With steady hands, I reached in and pulled out the thick folder of documents I had spent months preparing. Bank statements, property records, proof of assets he thought were hidden, proof of his affairs, proof of his lies. The room went silent. Ryan's smirk faded, because in that moment, everyone realized the truth. I wasn't the powerless wife he had controlled for years. I was the woman who had been quietly building a case strong enough to bring him to his knees. And I wasn't finished yet. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments about which country you're watching this video from. Enjoy the story. The folder in my hand felt heavier than anything I'd ever carried in my life. Not because of the paper inside, but because of what it meant: freedom, power, truth. Ryan's face shifted the moment I opened it. His smirk faltered, his jaw tightened, and for the first time in years, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before: fear. I laid the papers on the table slowly, deliberately. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. "Mrs. Whitmore," he said, his voice steady but curious, "what exactly do you have there?" "My proof, Your Honor," I replied, my voice calm, though inside, my heart was pounding so hard, it echoed in my ears. Ryan's lawyer immediately objected, his words spilling over each other, trying to control the situation. "Your Honor, this is clearly an attempt to dramatize," but the judge held up a hand. "Sit down, let's see it." The clerk gathered the documents from me and handed them to the judge. As he flipped through the pages, the silence in the room thickened. You could hear every turn of the paper, every soft shuffle, every sharp intake of breath, and then the questions began. "Mr. Whitmore," the judge said, his brows knitting together, "are you aware that several of these accounts are in your name but not listed in your financial disclosures?" Ryan shifted in his seat, his confident posture sagging. I don't know what she's talking about," he stammered. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out another set of documents. Emails, screenshots, messages that weren't just about money, but about the women he'd spent it on. Trips to Vegas, jewelry, hotel bills that screamed betrayal. "Stop it!" Ryan suddenly shouted, his voice booming in the courtroom. Heads turned. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispering frantically, but Ryan jerked away. "This is ridiculous. She's making it all up." But it was too late. The judge already had the evidence. My lawyer, who had been silent until now, finally leaned forward. His voice was calm, measured, but every word cut like glass. "Your Honor, this is just a portion of what my client has collected. If necessary, we can provide more." The judge gave a slow nod, his gaze fixed on Ryan. "Mr. Whitmore, it seems you've been less than honest with this court." The tension in the room was electric. I could feel the eyes of everyone on me. But for once, I wasn't shrinking under their gaze. I was standing taller than I ever had. Ryan, on the other hand, was unraveling. His face was red, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His voice cracked as he tried to speak, but the judge silenced him again. In that moment, I realized something powerful. The man who had spent years controlling me with his money, his rules, his arrogance, had lost control, but this wasn't over. Court adjourned for the day, and as people began filing out, Ryan leaned across the table, his voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? You have no idea what I'm capable of." For a moment, a chill ran down my spine. The old Meetha woman who had once been afraid of every word, every glare, every outburst would have broken down, but not anymore. I looked him straight in the eye and whispered, "Neither do you." His jaw clenched, but he said nothing else. He stormed out of the courtroom, his footsteps echoing like thunder. Outside, my lawyer turned to me. "That was a good start," he said softly. "But he's not going to back down easily. Men like him never do." And he was right, because when I returned home that night, I noticed something that made my heart stop. The lock on my front door was broken. The house was dark, silent. My hands trembled as I pushed the door open. For a split second, I thought maybe it was just wear and tear, that my mind was playing tricks on me after the long day. But then I stepped inside. The living room was a mess. Cushions tossed on the floor, drawers pulled open. My papers, the ones I hadn't taken to court yet, scattered everywhere. He had been here, and in that moment, the realization hit me like ice water. This battle wasn't just about money anymore. Ryan wasn't going to let me go that easily, and whatever came next was going to be darker than I ever imagined. The air in the house felt colder than usual, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I stood in the doorway, staring at the mess, my pulse pounding in my throat. Drawers ripped open, cushions on the floor, my private things scattered like someone wanted me to know. This wasn't just about searching. This was about sending a message. I stepped carefully inside, every creak of the floorboards making my stomach tighten. The house that once felt like a prison now felt like a battlefield. and I knew exactly who had been here. Ryan, I crouched down, picking up papers from the floor, notes, copies of receipts. My hidden folder. My heart sank when I realized some of them were missing. He had taken something. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. I almost dropped it, my hands trembling. When I glanced at the screen, a text from an unknown number glared back at me. "Nice folder you brought to court today. But let's see how strong you are without the rest of your little secrets." My stomach twisted. He had them. Whatever I hadn't taken to court, he now held in his hands. And then another text followed. "Cruel and sharp, you can't win. I own you." For years, those words would have broken me. But now, reading them, I felt something else rise inside me. Anger, strength, a quiet fire that burned hotter with every second. I called my lawyer immediately, explaining what I had walked into. His voice was steady, though I could hear the tension behind it. "You need to document everything. Pictures, a police report. Don't let him intimidate you. That's what he wants." So I did. I walked through the house with my phone camera, recording every overturned cushion, every scattered drawer, every broken lock. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to keep going, because I knew if I let fear stop me now, I'd lose everything. The police came later that night. 2 officers walked through the house, asking questions, writing notes. One of them, a tall woman with sharp eyes, looked at me and said, "Do you have any idea who could have done this?" I met her gaze without hesitation. Yes, my husband, but without hard proof. It was just suspicion. Ryan was too smart to leave fingerprints, too arrogant to slip up easily. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside my window made me jolt awake. I kept the lights on, the documents I still had tucked safely under my pillow like a shield. The next morning, another blow came. At the hearing, Ryan sat smugly beside his lawyer, sliding a folder across the table. "Funny thing," his attorney said smoothly, "we've come across some questionable documents on her part. Secret accounts. Hidden funds. It seems she hasn't been entirely honest either." I froze. My blood went cold. He had planted something, twisted the narrative, turned the spotlight back on me. For a moment, I thought I might collapse right there. The judge raised an eyebrow, flipping through the papers. My lawyer quickly leaned in, whispering urgently, "Stay calm. Don't let him see you panic." And that was when it hit me. This wasn't just a legal battle. It was psychological warfare. Ryan wanted me rattled. He wanted me to slip, to crumble under the weight of his lies, but I wouldn't. Not anymore. I straightened my back and met the judge's eyes. "Those aren't mine," I said firmly. My voice didn't shake, even though my heart raced. "This is exactly what he does. Lies, manipulation, control. He thinks if he throws enough dirt, no one will see the truth." The judge studied me for a long moment. Then he looked at Ryan. "Mr. Whitmore, this is becoming very concerning. If you think you can mislead this court, you're making a dangerous mistake." Ryan's face tightened, but he didn't speak. When the hearing ended, I gathered my things and walked out quickly, my chest still tight. Outside the courthouse, I could feel his eyes burning into me. I didn't even have to turn around to know he was standing there, watching, waiting. And then his voice rang out behind me, low and chilling. "You're playing a dangerous game. One of us is going to lose everything, and it won't be me." I kept walking, my spine rigid, my fists clenched, because deep down, I knew something Ryan didn't. I wasn't the same woman he had broken down years ago, and the more he tried to crush me, the stronger I was becoming. But still, I couldn't ignore the question that lingered like a shadow at the back of my mind. If he was willing to break into my home and twist the truth in court, what would he do next? For days after the hearing, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I stepped outside, I caught glimpses of a familiar car parked down the street. At night, I swore I heard footsteps outside my window. Shadows shifting in the yard. Ryan wasn't just fighting me in court anymore. He was trying to invade my every waking moment. One evening, as I was locking up for the night, my phone buzzed again. Another message from that unknown number. Careful walking alone. Bad things happen when you don't listen. My hands went cold. He wasn't even pretending anymore. I called the police again. But without concrete proof linking the messages to him, they couldn't do much. Keep the texts. Document everything, the officer said. His tone sympathetic, but helpless. The more you have, the stronger your case will be. So that's what I did. I screenshot every message, every call, every shadow that lingered too long near my house. My lawyer advised me to file a restraining order, and we began the process. But deep down, I knew a piece of paper wasn't going to stop Ryan. The next blow came from a place I didn't expect. My job. A week after the last hearing, I was called into my manager's office. She shut the door, her expression grim. "We've received some concerning reports," she said softly. "Someone's been calling, saying you've been stealing money. That you're unstable." My chest tightened. "It's not true," I said immediately, panic rising. "It's him, my ex. He's trying to ruin me." She sighed, her eyes full of pity. "I believe you, but the higher-ups want to investigate. In the meantime, we'll have to suspend you." I walked out of that office numb, the weight of Ryan's games pressing harder on my chest. He wasn't just after money anymore, he wanted to strip me of everything. My safety. My job. My reputation. That night, I sat alone at the kitchen table. Staring at the scattered papers, the glow of my phone lighting up with another text. "Told you, without me, you're nothing." For a moment, I almost broke. I buried my face in my hands, the tears hot and bitter. But then I remembered that day in court. The look on his face when he realized I wasn't afraid anymore. The silence when I laid out the truth, and I realized something important. Fear was exactly what he wanted. If I gave in, he won, so instead of replying, I started planning. I reached out to an old friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in years because Ryan had convinced me to cut her off. The second she heard my voice, she didn't hesitate. "Come over. Stay here if you need to." When I showed up at her doorstep with a small bag and swollen eyes, she wrapped me in a hug that felt like home. "You don't have to go through this alone anymore," she whispered. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But Ryan wasn't done. The very next day, Rachel's car tires were slashed. A threatening note tucked under the windshield wiper. "You can't hide from me." We called the police again. This time, the officer's voice was harder, more serious. "This is escalating. Be careful. Keep someone with you at all times." The fear was real, but so was my resolve. When the next court date arrived, I walked in with Rachel by my side, my lawyer, armed with new evidence, police reports, photos, texts. Ryan smirked from across the room, but this time his eyes were colder, darker, like a man who knew he was losing control. That, as the hearing dragged on, I caught him staring at me, his lips curling into a smile that wasn't really a smile at all. It was a promise. A warning. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just about winning in court anymore. This was about survival. The day of the final hearing arrived like a storm. The sky outside the courthouse was heavy with gray clouds, the kind that seemed to press down on everything beneath them. My heart pounded as I walked through the doors, Rachel at my side. This was it, the moment everything had been building. Ryan was already there, leaning back in his chair, arms crossed, his smug grin plastered across his face. He looked like a man who believed the world still revolved around him. But beneath that arrogance, I caught something else. A flicker, a shadow of desperation. The proceedings began, and, as expected, Ryan's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, dishonest, untrustworthy. He presented the so-called evidence Ryan had planted, the fabricated documents meant to bury me. But this time, we were ready. My lawyer stood, his voice clear and steady. "Your Honor, what Mr. Whitmore has submitted is not only false, but illegally obtained. Here are the police reports, the photographs, and the digital trail proving that the supposed evidence was manufactured." The judge's eyes narrowed as he studied the reports. His jaw tightened. "Mr. Whitmore," he said slowly, "did you break into your wife's home and tamper with these documents?" Ryan's face flushed red. He opened his mouth, but for once, no words came out. His lawyer tried to jump in, but the judge silenced him with a sharp bang of the gavel. Enough, the judge barked. This court does not tolerate deception. And Mr. Whitmore, if I find that you've committed fraud, there will be consequences far beyond this divorce. The air in the courtroom shifted. For the first time, Ryan wasn't in control, but the battle wasn't finished. Ryan leaned forward, his voice low, almost a hiss. "You'll regret this," he muttered, his eyes locked on me, and then, in a move that shocked everyone, he stood up abruptly and shouted, "This is all lies. She's nothing without me, nothing." Gasps filled the courtroom. The bailiff moved quickly, putting a hand on Ryan's shoulder, but Ryan shrugged him off. His rage spilling out for everyone to see, thought it was over. The mask he had worn for so long had shattered. The judge's voice cut through the chaos. "Mr. Whitmore, you are out of order. Sit down, or you will be removed from this courtroom." But Ryan didn't sit down. He lunged forward, his eyes wild. The bailiff acted instantly, restraining him, forcing him back into his seat. Ryan fought, shouting curses, his face twisted with fury, and in that terrifying display, every ounce of doubt anyone might have had about him disappeared. When the gavel finally fell, the judge's decision was swift and firm. The court finds in favor of Mrs. Whitmore. She is granted full control of the assets in question. Furthermore, given Mr. Whitmore's actions and clear attempts at intimidation, the court is issuing a restraining order effective immediately. The words rang in my ears like a bell of freedom. It was over. Ryan sat slumped in his chair, his hands clenched into fists, his face pale with disbelief. For the first time, he wasn't the man in control. He was just a man who had lost. Outside the courthouse, the sky finally broke, rain pouring down in heavy sheets. I stood there with Rachel, letting it soak into my skin, washing away the weight of years of fear. She squeezed my hand. "You did it." I took a deep breath, the air sharp and clean. "No," I said softly. "We did it, because I knew I hadn't survived this battle alone. I had found strength in myself, yes, but also in the people who stood beside me when Ryan tried to tear me down." The text stopped. The car that lingered near my house disappeared. Slowly, the shadows that Ryan had cast over my life began to lift. But I never forgot. I never forgot the look in his eyes when he realized he had lost. I never forgot the lesson. That came with every threat, every cruel word, every attempt to control me. That money doesn't buy love. Control doesn't equal power. And silence. Silence is never the answer. As I walked away from the courthouse that day, free at last, I knew one thing for certain. Ryan was wrong. Without his money, without his control, I wasn't anything. I was stronger than I had ever been, and I was finally free.